Do the New York Mets have any top prospects who can help them for the stretch run this season? I'll talk about that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, this year, we have seen the Mets call on some players from Syracuse that have had very big impacts on this roster. Namely, you had Mark Vientos, who started the year in AAA, who has been a huge contributor as the Mets starting third baseman. Jose Iglesias has been another one that has been added to the fold, has had a lot of success. Daniel Nunez came up, has been a big part of that bullpen before going on the IL. So we have seen the ability this year for the Mets to dip into AAA and find an impact player. What I wanted to do with 2 months left and no more trades to supplement this roster is comb through the Syracuse Mets team and see if there's anyone who could contribute down the stretch for this big league club. We're going to start with the two top prospects that are at that level, and that is Drew Gilbert and Luisangel Acuna. Now, Drew Gilbert, finally healthy, had a really bad hamstring pull earlier in the season that's kept them out pretty much all year. He's now played 6 games back healthy in AAA. He did play a few games in the Complex League, maybe a few in Port St. Lucie as well. So he's getting his legs under him. Now he's back to playing almost every day in Syracuse, which is a great thing for him just to develop. He's 2 for 4 in his last 2 games, but I don't know if I expect Drew Gilbert to play a role for the Mets down the stretch. I think it would take a litany of injuries to their outfield for them to call on Drew Gilbert. I think because they just picked up Jackie Bradley Jr., they added another depth piece where if let's just say right now, Ben Gamel goes down, I think Jackie Bradley Jr. would be the guy that was added. He's hitting 240 in 6 games, but he has 2 home runs in those 6 games. Still has a great glove out in the center field. Put him in all 3 spots if you wanted to. So I think Jackie Bradley Jr. is sort of the next outfielder up. DJ Stewart just got sent back down. They could always call him again. So while I'd love to see Drew Gilbert make his debut this year, and there is an outside chance with a fantastic August that he's a September call-up, I imagine that Drew Gilbert's going to stay there for the rest of the season. I don't know if they have any appetite to put him in the Arizona Fall League to get him some more reps. I think Jet Williams will certainly be in the Arizona Fall League, so it might make sense to have Gilbert there as well. And then next season, that might be the year where we finally see Drew Gilbert get his call. And it might not be early in the year because he still needs more time to develop. I think he'd come into spring with an outside shot, depending on the roster composition, to maybe make the team. But more likely, you're looking at a guy that's going to spend next year in AAA as well. And hopefully he can earn a promotion quickly and be part of the team next season. I don't imagine we see Drew Gilbert this year. I'm just happy he's healthy, playing games again. Now, there was a little bit of an uproar today because Luisangel Acuna was scratched from the lineup, and Mets fans see the big name. It's flashy. It's like, oh, is he joining the club? Well, it was just a sore foot that he was scratched for, and he has not been hitting well. There was a lot of buzz around him when he had a great month of June. I said, let's see him do it in July before the Mets would actually call him up, and hasn't been a good July for him, or wasn't a good July for him. He hit 236, 274 on base, 281 slug. That is a pretty bad 555 OPS for Luisangel Acuna. So I don't think that we see him unless the Mets just want his speed and defense as a September call-up. If you remember years ago, the Mets picked up Eric Young Jr. to just be a September call-up to steal bases, basically. I could see them doing that with Acuna, but I also would think that they might just want him to spend the entire season in AAA and continue to develop. Now, Brett Baty and DJ Stewart are the other guys outside of Jackie Bradley Jr. that I think are most realistic to get called on, because David Stearns was on Mets podcast and he was asked about getting help from the minor leagues. And those are the two names he mentioned, as well as saying that there's some Mets pitching down there that could potentially be called on. Obviously, a ton of relievers, but I think there's some starting pitchers that are interesting as well. So we will touch on those. But speaking specifically on Baty and Stewart, I think DJ Stewart, at this point, he'd have to get really hot. And he is someone that they like his approach at the plate. I don't think any Mets fans would be happy to see DJ Stewart back. Brett Baty, I feel like they have been priming him to make a return, but he hasn't really been tearing the cover out the ball. Actually, in July, he hit 231, 378 on base, which is good, but 385 slug. The reason why you wanted him playing every day in AAA is to find his power stroke and to hit for a higher average. Getting on base in AAA, drawing your walks, that's great, but he's not impacting the baseball. So that's definitely something that I think you'd want to see more of before you call on Brett Baty to play a bench role. They have been playing him at second base a lot. So that does tell me that they are either hoping that he can contribute down the stretch or just trying to prime him as a contingency plan if something happens to a Jeff McNeil or a Jose Iglesias. But Brett Baty is not swinging the bat well enough. I still think we probably see him at some point down the stretch, if nothing else, as a September call-up. But he just hasn't really hit the cover out the ball like you'd want to see him do facing that inferior competition in AAA. It's been a little bit of a struggle for him. A guy who's had no problems hitting AAA pitching is Luke Ritter, who's now homered in 3 straight games. In the month of July, he hit 325 with a 454 on base and a 558 slug. He's got 22 home runs and 77 RBIs in 95 games. If the Mets are looking for a lefty masher, Luke Ritter is the guy. I'm curious if we're going to see him this year because he doesn't have that top prospect shine to him, right? I don't even know if he's considered a top 20 prospect in the Mets system. Probably not because he's 27 years old, but the guy has absolutely mashed in the minor leagues this season. So I am very curious if we get a Luke Ritter cameo at some point. I'm rooting for him because I would just like to see it. The guy has hit so well. You just want to see him get rewarded for that, see him get that day of service time, at least in the big leagues. I don't know if it's going to happen, but really, if you're looking at impact bats in AAA, this guy right now is their best hitter in that lineup. So I wonder if at some point a spot could open up for him. What does Ben Gamel do for you right now after you picked up Jesse Winker? I think because Starling Marte is on the mend, Ben Gamel is just a placeholder, and I get that. There's not really a reason to bring up Luke Ritter when he's probably not going to have any clear road towards playing time. But if you have a setback to Marte, if something happens where you decide you need a bat, and particularly a right-handed bat to crush left-handed pitching, don't be surprised if Luke Ritter makes his MLB debut this season. Now, on the pitching front, there is one starter who is really starting to find his rhythm in AAA that could represent even better pitching depth than Tyler McGill. I want to talk about him. I want to talk about some reports about the Mets trade deadline strategy, as well as the top pitching prospect in this system right now. So we got a lot to discuss in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs winded down in the NBA and the NHL, we get fewer games in the sports. They're not sportsing like I want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want because all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. You can look at a same-game parlay. So let's just say you believe Pete Alonso is going to hit a home run against Tyler Anderson on Friday night. You can bet on Pete Alonso to hit that home run and the Mets to win the game. You can maybe take Alonso, the Mets over, and the Mets to win the game. There's a lot of ways you can play over at FanDuel. And again, remember, all customers will get a boost or a bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Today's episode is also brought to you by Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, h-vac, and electrical products online with their easy-to-use website, which is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining Supply House's free Trade Master program, where every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/T-M and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Now let's look at the pitching side of things here. And first things first, I want to mention that Tyler Zuber made his first appearance in the Mets organization. Zuber was acquired at the deadline from the Rays. He was optioned to AAA, did not have a good first appearance, gave up 2 runs on 3 hits, home run in 1 inning pitched. So we'll see how he continues to fare. There's a lot of arms, clearly, if you want to talk about relievers who could impact the Mets this year, whether it's guys like Matt Gage, who has made not an appearance, but he was on the roster, and Zuber being another one. Shintaro Fujinami still in AAA now after getting outrighted there following clearing waivers. A lot of different guys. Bres Montes de Oca is now on the IL again, actually. So, maybe Tommy John rehab hasn't gone great for him. We'll talk about those guys as they materialize because the roster churn is pretty great when it comes to relievers. When it comes to the starters who are now going to be depth pieces down the stretch for the Mets, obviously Tyler McGill is the 6th starter. He's in line whenever the Mets need another arm, but there are a couple of top prospects to talk about. Blade Tidwell is the first one. He's got a 5.56 ERA in his first 10 games pitched in AAA, 9 of those being starts. I don't think we see Tidwell this year. I don't even know if we see him early next year. He is a really exciting prospect for the Mets, but it might take some time. And there is some reliever risk there. So for now, I think Tidwell is right where he should be. He should stay in AAA for the rest of this season, possibly a lot of next season. But once he starts really rolling there, that is a piece to be pretty excited about. Now, Dom Hamill, I don't expect to see him this year either. He did have a good start his second to last time out where he struck out 9 across 6 strong innings pitched, did not walk any actually, gave up a couple of runs, but his most recent start, he gave up 3, didn't make it out of the 5th, still got an ERA in the 6s. I don't think we see Dom Hamill. The guy I really wanted to talk about is Mike Vasil because he is actually starting to pitch himself into that big league depth conversation. He had a terrible start to the season, but has slowly but surely figured it out. In 4 starts in June, he had a 4.26 ERA. And on June 26th, he made it through 6 innings for the first time all year. Since then, throughout the month of July, he went 6 or more in 4 of 6 starts. So 5 of his last 7 starts, he has made it through 6 innings. In July, he pitched to a 3.38 ERA, and his last start was his best yet in AAA. Went 7 innings, allowed 1 run on 4 hits, walked 2, hit a batter, and struck out 8. So all of a sudden, Mike Vasil is right there. I'd say he's 7th on the depth chart right now, and that means you're very close to the big leagues. Obviously, the Mets could always stretch out Jose Butto instead of going to a Mike Vasil, and that might be their preferred option if they were to need 2 starting pitchers. And also, I guess the other factor that you could look at is if Tyler McGill is really struggling in AAA, Vasil could jump over him. So he's getting into that conversation is the only reason why I wanted to mention him. Also, that's a guy that I think was probably shopped at the deadline as a prospect the Mets were willing to trade. I think that would hold true in the offseason as well if they needed to make an addition through the trade market. Mike Vasil is not one of their top tier pitching prospects. That's reserved for Christian Scott, Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong, and then I would even put Blade Tidwell in that conversation before I got to Vasil. And then I think Vasil's in a group that previously also had Tyler Stewart belong to it, as well as Dom Hamill. I think that if Mike Vasil can have 2 more strong months here and close out the season with, let's just say, 3 months in AAA with a sub 3.5 ERA, that all of a sudden is a pretty attractive piece if the Mets need to dangle somebody in the offseason. Now, speaking of trades, there was some interesting notes in an article from John Heyman today for the New York Post talking about the Mets trade deadline strategy when it came to prospects. He said the Mets checked on big relief stars Tanner Scott, Carlos Estevez, Pete Fairbanks, Kyle Finnegan, and others, but understandably didn't want to mortgage the future while barely in wild card position. So the Mets made sure to keep top prospects Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford, Luisangel Acuna, Blade Tidwell, Brandon Sproat, and others. Here's the interesting caveat. He says, the 100-mile-per-hour Sproat is a late call-up candidate, especially if the bullpen remains an issue. Now, I've been talking about Brandon Sproat joining this bullpen for a couple months now on this show as just an intriguing possibility. There's been a while where I've just sort of thrown it out there, and I did a whole podcast on it not that long ago about how he might be the Mets' secret weapon down the stretch, just like Corbin Burnes was for a Brewers team that David Stearns had. Can't remember if it was 2017 or 18. I think it was 18 where the Brewers went to Game 7 of the NLCS, and Corbin Burnes did not give up a run. I think he gave up 2 runs across 6 playoff appearances that year and was fantastic in September. So you just have to keep an eye on that. If there is one top prospect who will make his debut this year, to me, I would put my money on Sproat over Acuna. Actually, I don't know about that. Acuna as a September call for defense and speed still, I feel like both of those guys end up making a cameo at some point. But yeah, if I had to lean on, here's what I'd say. The greater impact, if there's a top prospect that could have a great impact on this team this season, it's Sproat. I don't think Acuna would make an impact. I don't think Gilbert would make an impact. Those guys aren't going to get everyday reps this year. I don't even imagine Mike Vasil would make a massive impact. I think it would probably be just a spot start in a specific instance where maybe the Mets needed an arm. Brandon Sproat could be a difference maker in that bullpen. He could go fastball changeup alone and be a weapon out of the bullpen. So I am very, very curious if that happens. Ultimately, if it doesn't, it means that the bullpen has held up and you don't need that type of an arm to be inserted into the fold, and you can just get him primed and ready to go to potentially be part of the rotation early next season. But Sproat is quickly becoming one of the top prospects in this system. He might finish the year as the top prospect in this system. So stay tuned for those type of rankings once we get to the end of the year. A couple more interesting notes from John Heyman's article. So the Mets fielded significant interest in Brett Baty, both improved defense and an 897 AAA OPS. They still like him. I think think about the conversations the Mets were having. A lot of conversations on relievers. And so if the Mets didn't want to part with Brett Baty for a relief pitcher, I can understand that. Here's an interesting note as well. He said teams did have the impression the Giants considered dealing 2-time Cy Young winner Blake Snell, and the Yankees, Dodgers, Padres, Orioles, Cubs, and Rangers checked in. The Mets did not apparently check in, according to John Heyman. And then here's the other part of it. Sources say Giants wanted a top 100 prospect and for the acquiring team to take responsibility for the contract, which included a $30 million 2025 player option. Maybe David Stearns just doesn't like Blake Snell. But if you're telling me that a top 100 prospect and taking on the contract is all it would have taken to get Blake Snell, what top 100 prospect? Like, did the Mets at least place a phone call and say, hey, Luisangel Acuna is a top 100 prospect. Can we do a straight swap? Because if it was me and you could have essentially rented Luisangel Acuna in your system for a year and basically have traded Max Scherzer at the end of his contract with money to take on Blake Snell, but for a playoff push where you were in the race, I would have made that trade in an absolute heartbeat. So the fact that the Mets didn't even check in, I don't love that. But then at the same time, they might have been looking for a specific top 100 prospect. It might have been if the Mets did even check in. And again, John Heyman saying they didn't. The deal might not have gotten done unless it was Sproat, Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert, and I wouldn't have traded any of those guys for Blake Snell. But it's interesting. Definitely an interesting report. Last piece of minor league news before we preview the weekend series that lies ahead. Sean Reed-Foley made his second rehab appearance, this one in Double-A. That was on July 31st, and he struck out the side. So Sean Reed-Foley getting closer and closer to making his return. We're going to see him before Daniel Nunez or Reed Garrett, which makes sense because, if I'm not mistaken, he was the first one to hit the IL. And he has been a very good pitcher for the Mets in leverage this season. So I'm excited to see them get him back. Don't expect it over the weekend. I would say the earliest you might see is against the Cardinals, or maybe he meets you in Colorado. I think kind of worst case scenario, you don't see him until the very tail end of this road trip, if not the homestand. But I sort of feel like at some point on this road trip, the Mets are going to get Sean Reed-Foley back. Relievers don't need that many appearances to get themselves right. You might want to have him throw it back-to-back. I imagine they're going to get him into a game, on Friday, and then maybe get him into one on Sunday, and then one potentially on Tuesday, and then he's good to go. I don't know. So we'll see exactly when Sean Reed-Foley makes his return, but again, probably fairly soon. Now, the Mets are going to face off against the Angels this weekend. I will preview that series that lies ahead in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Liquid IV. Get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. Talking about Liquid IV, and what I love about Liquid IV is both its convenience and how it makes me feel. All you got to do, tear the packet, pour, and enjoy. And for me, I'm a runner. I like to go for my jogs in the afternoon, and you sweat a lot in South Florida. You need that hydration. When I usually come back for runs before Liquid IV, it would take me multiple glasses of water to feel hydrated. With Liquid IV, one glass, and I'm feeling great. And I love the strawberry lemonade flavor. That is my go-to. But the new Popsicle Firecracker is really good as well, blending lemon, lime, cherry, and raspberry flavors. One stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates you better than water alone. 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service. We're going to updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, the Mets kick off a 10-game road trip in Anaheim on Friday night, and it is a brutal trip because the Mets had to make up a game that got rained out against the Cardinals earlier this season. That's an important game. The Cardinals are right in the thick of this wild card race. So the Mets are going to play 3 games over the weekend in Anaheim. Then they're going to fly to St. Louis for a makeup game that would have been an off day on Monday. Then they're going to fly to Colorado for 3 games. Then go to Seattle for 3 more before finally getting an off day and heading home for a 9-game homestand. Funny thing about that, there's no off days between their homestand and the next road trip, which is in San Diego. So the Mets are going to get a nice 9-day respite and then head right back to the West Coast, play a pair of very important series. Luckily, there is an off day between them, I believe. But they're going to have to play the Padres for 4. Then I think there's an off day. Then play the Diamondbacks for 3. So this is really kind of a make-or-break stretch of their season here. You got to do well on this road trip. You got to come home and defend there, play a strong homestand. Then you play really your 2 chief rivals, I would say, right now, as far as this wild card push is concerned. It's going to be a tough road to hoe for sure. Now, the Angels are an easy part of this stretch. They're 47-62 on the season. This is not a great baseball team. You got to take advantage when you get these teams on the schedule, particularly because the Mets schedule gets much tougher at the end of this month, as I just mentioned, as well as into September. So take advantage of these teams when you face them. Game 1 is going to be Paul Blackburn versus Tyler Anderson. And the Mets really got a raw deal because there's no world where Tyler Anderson should still be on the Angels. They should have traded him. What were they thinking? Anderson has a 2.96 ERA in this season, been so good, and the price for starting pitching was remarkably high at this deadline. Complete malpractice that Anderson is on the Angels. If anything, he should be on the Mets right now. But the Mets got a tough lefty to go up against in this outing. Paul Blackburn, we get to see what he can do in his Mets debut. That's going to be an exciting game to watch for sure. Game 2 on Saturday, David Peterson versus Jose Soriano. Soriano in his second year in the big leagues, first year as a starter. He's got a 3.69 ERA. He's been very effective. So tougher matchup than you might think. Sunday, Jose Quintana versus Griffin Canning. Canning has a 5.25 ERA on the season. So maybe a nice, easier rubber match if it gets to it. But ideally, the Mets will handle business and take as many of these games as they can. One thing I want to do as we head into these weekends, in particular throughout the rest of the season, is sort of take a look at the landscape. What else is going on in this wild card race? Who's playing against each other? Are there some teams that have tough matchups? Where can the Mets get an edge in this race? So to take you around the wild card, Cardinals are playing the Cubs right now in, I believe, a 4-game set, and they were walked off on Thursday night in that game. So the Cubs get a little bit up in the wild card race. That's fine. They're pretty far back. Cardinals lose a game. That's a good sign. And hopefully the Cubs maybe get them down bad before the Mets have to come in and play the Cardinals for a game. That series taking place in Chicago, so they're going to have to travel short distance, but they'll have to travel on Sunday as well. Diamondbacks are playing the Pirates this weekend. I wonder if Paul Skeens is pitching. Let's just take a quick look. Pirate pitching probables. I'm just curious. You want to see the Pirates win those games, I would say for sure. It's Luis Ortiz, Mitch Keller, and Paul Skeens. That's a rough weekend for the Diamondbacks without Christian Walker in the lineup. I'll tell you that much. They got Fott, Montgomery, and Ryan Nelson going. So Pirates should win that series, which would be good for the Mets because the Diamondbacks have been as hot as the Mets. And that's really the team that, as I talked about on yesterday's show, I'd be most concerned about taking the Mets spot in the wild card. So tough series for them against Pittsburgh. The Braves got an easy one. They're playing the Marlins. The Rockies are squaring off against the Padres, so the Padres got an easy one as well. Those two teams are maybe going to create some separation as the top two wildcard teams. Giants and Reds, who are on the fringes of the race, are playing each other. And then about rounds it off there. So this is an opportunity for the Mets here. You got the Padres and the Braves who are playing some easy teams as well. But the Diamondbacks could lose some games this weekend. The Cardinals could lose some games this weekend. This is a chance to get up on those teams and grab that wild card spot again. Let me confirm where the Mets are in the wild card standings before we close. Didn't check today as the Mets did not play. They're still half a game back of the Diamondbacks. So here's your opportunity to maybe get a little bit of traction. Diamondbacks have won 3 in a row. So we'll see how they fare against a Pirates team that is 2 games over 500 and has their 3 best pitchers right now, I would say, squaring off for this series. Should be a lot of fun. As always, thank you all for listening. I'll be back for a show on Saturday, assuming that we get a nice game on Friday night. So make sure you follow, rate, and review so you don't miss it. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 10,000 subs by the end of the season. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports on YouTube. Talking about Locked On Sports today with our local experts from each team, league-wide experts from each league. You find Locked On Sports today streaming 24/7 on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV.